Copyright disclaimer: under the Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comments, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing.
21 UAP Task Force report, which acknowledged 144 unexplained cases, signals a shift toward mainstream acceptance of UFO research. Future discoveries may hinge on interdisciplinary collaboration, combining astrophysics, engineering, and anthropology to unravel the origins of these enigmatic objects. Winged UFOs remain one of the most intriguing mysteries of our time. From the Ohio butterfly craft to the massive Soho object, these sightings challenge our assumptions about technology, science, and the cosmos. Whether they are extraterrestrial visitors, secret military projects, or advanced human-made drones, their presence sparks wonder and debate. As we continue to explore the skies, the truth behind winged UFOs may one day come into focus, revealing new insights about our place in the universe. Until then, they will continue to inspire awe, curiosity, and the relentless pursuit of
Oh Lord, y'all, oh Lord, y'all. All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rachak Wadash. Double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone who rule very well, very beautifully. Double salutations be unto the Akim, out here pushing this gospel and truth and sincerity to the best of their ability, given to them by Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai. Peace, blessings, and salutations be unto the elect scattered abroad. May the election of Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Lord willing, fall upon your houses. This is Brother Quanawath coming back at you, Lord will, with edifying lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Lord will. It is edifying, Lord will. It is straight to the point. And as you had seen, you know, a chariot sightings, man. There's been more and more and more chariot sightings, and Esau is definitely, you know, afraid, right, of what he is seeing. You know, you had recently, you had J.D. Vance, you know, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was J.D. Vance or either Pete Hegseth. I think it was Vance, though. He basically stated that, you know, the chariots, which they call UAPs or UFOs, which UAP stands for unidentified aerial phenomenon. UFO, if you don't know, ultimately stands for unidentified flying object. But these things are identified. They're identified in the scriptures, right, as the chariots of Israel, you know, which are also spoken about in Ezekiel, the first chapter, you know, that wheel within a wheel. Right, those things, the things that Esau calls UAPs or UFOs, those are described and identified in the scriptures as the chariots of Israel, right? And that the angels, right, ultimately are in these chariots, man. You know, and again, right, the chariot sightings have been, you know, been increasing drastically. More and more chariots, you know, are being seen. You know, I posted a short, which, you know, I use this as my second video, you know, in this lesson. I was a chariot sighting just yesterday at a camp, man. You know, at the very beginning of camp, before we even turned on, you know, the actual video, right? Brothers got together and, you know, we looked up and there's a chariot just right there, man. You know, the difference is, you know, we look at the chariots, right? Lord, will we be part of the elect? We look at the chariots as our, you know, as vehicles of salvation. You know, for us, man, Lord will, you know, we be part of that number, right? Those are the same vehicles that are going to be delivering us, you know, from that hellfire, you know, that is to come, right? But to Esau, right, it is a curse, right? As we, you know, we're going to get in Zechariah, the 5th chapter. It is a curse that goeth upon the face of the whole earth, man, you know, and Esau is very, very afraid, right? And I got this article on End Time Headlines. It says Congressman claims if Americans saw alien reports, which are not aliens, right? That's just what Esau, you know, is ultimately calling them. But we understand them to be the angels, right, inside the chariots, right? It says Congressman claims if Americans saw alien reports he was shown, this country would come unglued. You'd be up at night, right? Because the different things that are being shown, right? The shapes of the chariot, the shapes of the chariots, and the abilities of these chariots, man, are out of this world, literally. You know, they're not of this world, man. You know, and that's scaring Esau. You know, it's scaring the shit out of him. You know, that's why he ultimately said, again, go back to what J.D. Vance had said, right? He said that there was, you know, he believes that those, so-called UFOs, right? They're ultimately demons, you know, and to him, they're demons, you know, but to us, right, they're angels, right? And those in those vehicles of salvation, you know, again, Lord, will we be part of the elect? But I'll continue to read. It's a short article. It says, a U.S. congressman is drawing attention after making unusual, blunt remarks about what he says he has learned in classified briefings on unidentified aerial phenomena or UAPs. Right? It says, speaking about this issue, Republican Tim Burchett of Tennessee suggests that the information shared behind closed doors is far more unsettling than what the public has been told. Now, I want to look at that word unsettling, right? Because again, Esau is scared. Unsettle, right? To undo, to change a settled state, reverse, oppose, right? Unsettled, right? Not peaceful, right? Disturbed, right? As you read right here, right? Disturbed, right? These people will be, disturbed, right? It would disturb you, not peaceful, disturbed, lawless, you know? Ultimately meaning, you mean these people would be frightened, you know? It says, according to an article published by People, Burchett said, if you were privy to some of the information that I've seen, you'd be up at night. His comments add to a growing wave of political interest in UAPs, a term the government now uses instead of UFOs. While officials have acknowledged encounters with unexplained objects, much of the data remains classified, fueling speculation and concern, which they've been more and more, as the years go on, they've been releasing a lot of that information, I think actually Donald Trump actually, signed an executive order, if I'm not mistaken, right, to release the classified, the classified UFO, so-called UFO information, right? It says Burchett, who has been vocal about government transparency, indicated that what he has seen goes beyond ordinary explanations, right? Again, because it's outside this world, man, right? These chariots, they're not normal. It's not, the same as, what Esau's capabilities are, right? This far exceeds Esau's capabilities and thoughts, and this is why he's scared, because this is they're powered by the spirit of Yahweh Bashim Shai. It's not powered by jet fuel engines, metal, so on and so forth, man. You even had a video of a pilot came out and stated that these so-called UFOs, these vehicles, are thousands of years in technology in advance to what they have available in the earth now, right? From whatever nation, it doesn't matter, right? Thousands of years in advance, right? As far as technology, man, so this is again, out of this world, right? It says, as reported in People, he emphasized that the briefings include material that is very disturbing, though he stopped short of offering specific details due to security restrictions. The congressman has been part of a bipartisan push to declassify more information about UAP sightings, particularly those involving military personnel. Lawmakers from both parties have argued that the public deserves clearer answers, especially when it comes to potential national security. Still, officials in the defense and intelligence communities have often taken a more cautious tone. They acknowledge that many sightings remain unexplained, but stress that this does not automatically point to extraterrestrial origins. Well, then what does it point to then? If you can't explain it, right? You can't, you can't just, Esau likes to explain things away. It's getting to the point where regular people are having these sightings. Regular everyday people are seeing these things, man, and the sightings are getting tremendous, You know, you can go on my my YouTube page, right? The current one that I'm on right now. You can look at this one and go into my shorts. There's a video I have of a chariot looking like like a bonfire, like the fire up in the sky. You know, it looked like a straight up ball of fire. You know, and it just appeared out of nowhere. You know, and the brother Yowana was with me, and we were, hey, we ain't never seen nothing like it. And as well as what you've seen on the video, right? You got a chariot that's, you know, flashing all these different colors. This is not AI, right? Those are real accounts. Those are real videos that are being taken of chariots, you know, being balls of flames and multiple coming out at once, and you know, and then they all come together and shoot up in the sky and go to one. You know what I mean? Turn into one big ball of fire. These are chariots, man, right? These things that Esau cannot explain away, you know. And again, it's scaring the shit out of him, man. You know. But it says Birch's remarks, however, reflect a sense of urgency, right? Hence the reason why Esau is trying to speed things up as well, man. Right? Revelations 12:12. You know what? That he had but a short time, because the chariot sightings are increasing. You know, and this devil sees the chariots, man. He sees everything. You have to understand that those are, you know, when Esau goes into his little secret, you know, meetings and summits and so on and so forth, Esau's talking about those things. You know, so you best believe, right? Esau's trying to hurry things up because he sees what's about to take place, right? It says in the People article, he suggests that the level of secrecy surrounding the issue may be excessive, saying the American public is being kept in the dark about matters that could have significant implications. And really, what if they ultimately showed you everything that they have? You know, hey, these people would be tripping, man, straight up tripping. You know. These people will be tripping, man. You know, again, that's because they don't understand, fully, they don't understand, what these chariots are here to do, man. You know, they're, as of right now, right, they're here taking notes, right? We're reading Amos, the 9th chapter, Amos 9 and 8, right? Behold, the eyes of the Lord upon the sinful kingdom, right? The eyes of the Lord are going into those angels in the chariots, man. You know, but I want to grab this is Zechariah 5:1. It says, and because the scriptures, the so-called UFOs, right, are in the Bible, right? Zechariah 5:1. It says, then I turned and lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a flying roll. And he said unto me, what seest thou? And I answered, I see a flying roll. The length thereof is 20 cubits, and the breadth thereof 10 cubits. Meaning, he's looking at this so-called UFO. Right, again, a chariot, and he's describing like the length of it. He's like, it looks to be about this size, and you know, that's in the Bible, right? It says, then said he unto me, this is the curse that goeth forth over the face of the whole earth, right? And we're seeing chariots everywhere. It's not just in a certain place. We're seeing chariot sightings everywhere. There's accounts everywhere, all over across the world, right? It says, for everyone that stealeth shall be cut off as on this side according to it, and everyone that sweareth shall be cut off as on that side according to it, right? It's a curse that goeth the whole earth, and hence the reason why you're seeing, J.D. Vance. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it was J.D. Vance, but he basically stated that, that he believes that these, chariots, right, are demons, and that scares these devils, man. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to react. That's why they can't sit here and explain it. They're like, oh, well, we don't know. It's outside their level of understanding. It says, verse 4, it says, I will bring it forth, saith Yahweh, Bahashim Yahweh Shah of hosts, and it shall enter into the house of the thief, and into the house of him that sweareth falsely by my name, and it shall remain in the midst of his house. And again, we're seeing, a lot of the chariot sightings here in America. Esau, again, you can't stop him, especially out here in Arizona, right? One of the hot spots for, chariot sightings, man, right? Nevada, Arizona, California, SoCal, right? South California, is where you see a majority of, the chariot sightings. But again, they're happening all over, It says, and shall consume it with the timber thereof and the stones thereof. Because eventually, right, these chariots are going to be shooting out those laser beams, man. Right? Because again, right, we stated earlier that these chariots are going to come to do two things. right? Well, as of right now, they're on a reconnaissance mission, right? They're gathering intel and ultimately sending that intel, up the chain of command, up to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai, sending that information up. But soon they're going to be released, right? And they're going to do two things, right? They're going to be, for the destruction, right, of this world, right? Because we understand that Yahweh Shai is coming, right? The seeing the chariots and the increase in chariot sightings, right, that is an indication that Yahweh Shai is coming, right? As we read, right, and what does it say, Luke 21:28, right? It says, what did Yahweh Shai tell us to do? It says, and when these things begin to come to pass, then look up, right, and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. So not only are we to, ultimately cheer up and to, ultimately be of good cheer, but we're to literally look up and we see the chariots, man. Right, we see that we see the vehicles of of salvation, right, flying over us, man, which ultimately give us a boost of faith, but also let us know, hey, Yahweh Shai is right around the corner, man. As these chariot sightings continue to increase, but see, as they are Lord, will we be a part of the elect? As they are a blessing unto us, they're a curse unto the rest of the world, man. Because they're coming to destroy, man. Coming to destroy, right? We understand that when Yahweh Shai comes, he's coming with an army, right, of chariots as well, right? Yahweh Shai coming on that fathership, where you read that in Second Esdras, the 13th chapter. He's coming on that fathership, right? So big that you can't see the ends of it. But it's not just going to be Yahweh Shai, right? Yahweh Shai is the King of Kings, right? So when you look into all these different movies throughout history, when a king ultimately travels from one place to another, he travels with an army, and his entrance and his exit is extremely grand. Well, Yahweh Shai is the King of Kings, right? So he's going to have the best entrance, man. Revelations 19 and verse 11, it says, and I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, which is symbolic for pure power, right, is what Yahweh Shai is coming in, right? Isaiah the 47th chapter, he said, I will not meet thee as a man, right? Though Yahweh Shai will look like a man, he's going to be in that angelic, that celestial body, with spiritual power, unlimited power, if you will, It says, and I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. And see, that's what Yahweh Shai is coming to do as well, right? To make war with the rest of these heathens in their nation, in their armies. You read in Isaiah the 34th chapter that those armies will be destroyed, but nonetheless, right, Yahweh Shai is still coming, right, to make war with those nations and their armies, man. And will eventually, when he comes, right, he will destroy their armies, and put them into, to servitude, right? Verse 12, it says, his eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, right? Which is symbolic for, again, when he comes and casts down all rule, power, and authority, as we read in 1 Corinthians 15 and 24, all that, that power, and authority will be, ultimately, taken, by Yahweh Shai, right? It says, and he had a name written that no man knew but he himself, and he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, right? And his name is called the Word of the Most High. Now, again, Isaiah the 63rd chapter, it talks about Yahweh Shai coming and treading that wine press, right? Meaning that when Yahweh Shai comes, it's going to be, he's going to, ultimately be shedding a lot of blood, but see, it's not just going to be himself, right? He's going to bring that army with him, as we read right here, verse 14. It says, and the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, with white and clean. Like, they're coming in pure power as well, right? Let's grab this in Jude, because it talks about Yahweh Shai, coming with that army as well, right? It says right here, Jude 1 and 14, it says, and Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints, right? He's coming with that massive army, right? It says to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds, which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Right? He's going to ultimately destroy the wicked. That's what they're going to do, right? Those who, and we know the wicked, right, ultimately starts with Esau, Edom, right? The self-proclaimed so-called white man, the physical counterpart of the spiritual demon Satan, right? And even all the way down to, 2/3, right? 2/3 of you Israelites here, on this side, right, that ultimately continue to follow right after the ways of Esau, Edom, right? The devil who is in control, right? Which everything that he has set up is contrary to Yahweh Shem Shai, right? And the Lord Yahweh Shem Shai rose up men, right, to feed you with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And right, part of that wisdom, knowledge, and understanding is knowing that the man who is in charge is completely against you, right? So you want to continue to follow someone who is against you. And I'm speaking to you Israelites, right? You so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, man, right? Who this word ultimately resonates with, right? We're not supposed to be, ultimately trusting and relying, on this devil, because he's contrary to Yahweh Shem Shai, which means he's contrary to us, because the Lord is for us. Esau is against us, right? Just look at the history, man. And if you want to continue to rely on that devil, hey, well, guess what? You're going to have to be destroyed. You're going to have to eat one of these lasers from the, laser beams from these chariots is right along with them, man. If a nuclear missile don't hit you, the Lord ain't playing, man. It says, verse 15, it says, out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and the wrath of the almighty power. And he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. That's right, man. But it says out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword. That's those laser beams, that are going to be coming out of those chariots, man. Right? If I'm not mistaken, you could read in Habakkuk, the 3rd chapter. In verse 3, it says the Most High came from Teman. It says, and the Holy One from Mount Parah, Salah, his glory covered the heavens, and the earth was full of his praise. Right? So when he comes, right, in that power and great glory, he's going to come with what? In that fathership and with that army. It says he's going to cover the heavens. The whole entire sky is going to be full of chariots, man. All the way around the entire globe, right? The sky is going to be full of chariots, man. It says, and his brightness was as the light, and he had horns coming out of his hand, and there was the hiding of his power. Now, is it possible for Yahweh Shai to obviously have those laser beams come out of his hand? Yes, of course, right? He's not coming as a man, so he's going to have spiritual power. But this is talking about those laser beams coming out of those chariots. Like you see on Independence Day. The original Independence Day with Will Smith, when that laser beam came down, those people were on top of the building and it just destroyed everything. That's what it's talking about, man. Right? It says, and before him went the pestilence, and burning coals went forth at his feet. He stood and measured the earth. He beheld and drove asunder the nations, and the everlasting mountains were scattered. And it says the perpetual hills do bow. His ways are everlasting. So Yahweh Shai ain't coming, to beg and plead, you nations to be under subjection. No, when Yahweh Shai comes, he's taking it. He's taking that power, that authority, that rulership, consecrating all these nations that are in power and all the everything that they have, right? He's consecrating it unto himself, and dividing those spoils with his friends, the elect of the nation of Israel, man. This is ultimately what is set to take place. The chariot sightings, man, they're not just, here, just showing their face, man. Eventually the Lord Yahweh, because right now, again, they're on a reconnaissance mission, right? Taking notes. They come and, mess with Esau and his system, set the nukes off, and set, maybe have some, the nukes start to go start a countdown. Esau got to rush to turn it off. You know what I mean? Like, they've been doing, or Esau and, the nations will try to shoot down the chariot, but their missiles, none of their missiles will work. None of their munitions or ammo or whatever you want to call them, will work, because again, they're outside the normal comprehension, the worldly comprehension, man. Right? These things are from a whole nother dimension, the spiritual realm, and Esau can't handle that. Esau is, he's scared. He sees what's going on, man, because it's not, it's not a blessing unto Esau, Edom. It's a curse, right? Seeing these chariots, because he knows that he hath but a short time. And again, the reason why he's trying to speed up, but see, these chariots, right? Therefore, they're a blessing unto us, man. They're a blessing unto us. Lord, will we be part of the elect? The more chariot sightings that we see, hey, brothers, of course, we see the chariots, and we hope, right, they're for our good, right? We hope that the chariots are taking notes of the good things, that we that we're doing, and not necessarily the bad, right? Yeah, we make those prayers, and we steady have that humility and that hope, but at the same time we're rejoicing, man, because we know that it's a curse unto Esau. We know that, him seeing this is like, damn. And now he's really got to move, man. And we hope that these chariot sightings, help him to move faster, because fuck Esau and fuck his goddamn world, man. They're a blessing unto us, man. And I want to grab this account in 2 Kings, the 6th chapter, right, when it goes into Elisha, and ultimately coming up against the Syrians, when they went to go ultimately come after him, man. It says I'll start right here, verse 13, just kind of hitting the points, right? 2 Kings 6 verse 13, and he said, go and spy where he is, and they're trying to look for Elisha, right? It says that I may send and fetch him, and it was told him, saying, behold, he is in Dothan. Therefore sent he thither horses and chariots and a great host, and they came by night and compassed the city about. So, the city of Dothan, right, where Elisha, right, was now compassed, because they want to ultimately come after, Elisha, It says, which we know that persecution is coming as well, right? It's right around the corner. You read in Revelations 12 and verse 13, that Esau is seeing that he's, being cast down to the earth, that his power is waning. So what is he going to do? He's going to persecute, the Israelites. He's going to come after the Israelites, because again, we're seeing his agenda, right, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Shai, and we're ultimately warning you people. See, this is the same position that Elisha was in, right? He wasn't necessarily there, right, but he warned, he was warning, saying, hey, don't go over here, don't do this, because ultimately he's waiting for you, right? There's an army waiting for you. And again, in the same sense, where we're warning as well, we're warning the people, hey, this is what Esau's about to do, and Esau doesn't like that, man. Esau doesn't like the fact that that we're ultimately revealing his plans unto the world, really warning the Israelites, right? And even out of the Israelites, those who will hear, those who are been foreordained to to receive this word, to receive this wisdom, knowledge, and understand it. It says verse 14, therefore sent he thither horses and chariots and a great host, and they came by night and compassed the city about. And when the servants of the man of the Most High was risen early and gone forth, behold, an host compassed the city, both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, alas, my master, how shall we do? And he answered, fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. So as we see Esau preparing to, come in like a flood, as we, see him, ultimately getting scared, right, at, the presence of the chariots and preparing to, come after the Israelites, we see the chariots and we're reminded, right, consistently that Yahweh Shem Shai, has got our back. Again, Lord, will we be part of the elect, right? Verse 17, it says, and Elisha prayed and said, Yahweh B'Shem Shai, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And Yahweh opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. Right. Because the Lord said what? That the angels are ministers of fire. Right. So he saw, right, he opened his eyes and you just see a sea of fire, the different chariots and, the angels standing about and, just completely, surrounding them. Right. Kind of making like a wall between them and, the heathens. Right. That army. Right. And the numbers of the chariots and the angels, right, vastly surpass the army of the heathens, which really, it'll take one angel to destroy that entire army, but imagine thousands upon thousands upon thousands of chariots and angels standing around you, man. See, and that's what we see, through the Spirit. That's what we believe, right? The scriptures say, right? Psalms 34:7, right? The angels encampeth round about him that fear the Lord Yahweh Bashem El Shai. And this is what we have to continue to meditate upon. It's what we have to continue to, to think upon, man. Because these are the times that we're in. As we see these chariot sightings increase, as we see Esau moving faster, we have to remember that Yahweh Bashem El Shai, in many different accounts, has had the angels, come to our aid, man. And be a curse unto our enemies, but a blessing unto us. Many different times, man. Right? It says, and when they came down to him, Elisha prayed unto Yahweh and said, smite this people, I pray thee, with blindness. And he smote them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. So, the Lord is going to work on our behalf. These chariots, right, are going to ultimately, aid us. Just like they did in the time of the wilderness, man, when Yahweh Shai was in that, that chariot, right, which was a cloud by day, but a pillar of fire by night, protecting us from our enemies, man, right, keeping our enemies away from us, right, and being a terror unto them. This is what we have to look forward to, man. So it's beautiful, man, seeing these chariots, especially seeing them, like at camp, right before you get into a lesson, man, and or after you make a prayer, you go outside, you look up, it's nighttime, you see chariots passing by. That's a blessing, man. Count yourself blessed, right, to be able to, ultimately see these things and know, right, the objectives, if you will, right. As of right now, again, they're on a reconnaissance mission, but soon they're ultimately going to be, dished out, right, or dispatched, if you will. And again, Lord will be part of the elect. One of their objectives is to deliver us from the hands of our enemies, man. From the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence, which is the what? The snare of the fowler is going into that trap that Esau set in, which is, we know the ultimate trap is, Esau, making this RFID microchip mandatory, and then the noisome pestilence, which goes into those nuclear hellfire, those ICBM nuclear missiles that are going to be used. Yahweh Bashem El Shai, Lord, will we be part of the elect, man? Is going to deliver us from those things, man. But that's all I got, man. Lord will, it was edifying. Lord will, it was exhorting, unto those who Yahweh Bashem El Shai is ultimately deemed to receive it. The Wadi Yahweh Bashem El Shai for putting the Spirit on me to do this lesson. But with that, Lord will is edifying. Lord will, straight to the point. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh. Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Merchak Kodash, double honor to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders, great millstone. Till next time, I say shalom.